Testing, 1, 2, 3, testing, 1, 2, 3.
I hear you. Good morning.
Testing, 1, 2, 3, testing, 1, 2, 3.
Can't hear you as much.
Okay, Ellen, but this isn't really going to be very interactive today with the Zoom. But I'll try. But it's not like I've got
No,
it.
I know that. I just expect to be a viewer,
Gotcha.
but the sound was better the first testing.
I mean, like right now.
Yeah.
Because you heard the second one going through my phone because it was on the delay. You heard me doing it the first time on delay through my phone. I was
You're so
checking.
cute.
I was checking the stream out.
You're so cute.
fatal.
I wanted to see I'm, thank you. Yeah, I'm from. Well, I was back for a year, and it's kind of a long story. I ended up going back and seeing so more real ones, and it really is the I had to explain to my friends that I'm dying, and he said that it's the about 2 years ago I talked to him, and I'm seeing
Hey, good morning. Nice to see you.
Good to see you. A good turnout.
You can sit here anywhere you. Yeah.
Why don't you sit here, Barbara? Or sit here and I'll sit here. Been well?
Yeah. I just was like, if I looked a little distracted, I got my kids are just arrived from Israel to New York this morning, and so
They just got that.
yeah, so I'm just kind of like trying to make sure that that getting back down here,
Were they going on a group trip or just the?
It was a group. It was kind of like a very relaxed group trip. It was a volunteer trip. I mean, they were just happy to get back to Israel. My kids have become equal Zionists to me, which makes me proud. It just suggests that I did something right by sharing those values.
Yeah.
Earl, good to see you in person. I'm so glad.
yes, I did watch.
Welcome.
So,
Glad to have you. Well, depends on how well you sing.
You really don't want.
Okay, so clearly not such nuts. My praises were not sung so well. Thank you. Thank you, Elizabeth.
A nonstop.
Thank you. We're going to get started in about, what do you say, we'll give it like a minute or two, and then we'll get started. So you have your last chance to fill up on your stuff, and then we'll get started. You know, we work on Jewish time, which is we want to do things on time, but we reserve the right to give a minute or two because people are still shuffling their feet. You know, just taking their time. Anne, I see there's an Anne on Zoom. Anne, would you mind just introducing yourself so I know who it is? Or not. No need. All right, well, so 60 more seconds. So you guys, please have meaningful conversations for 60 seconds. Deep, meaningful, intrusive, yes? No? Oh, you think Anne's Marianne? Oh, no, that's Anne Wolfson, my cousin. My cousin from a different grandfather. All right, we're going to get started. Welcome. Take. Hopefully you have a text. There are extras lying on the tables if you're in a seat that doesn't have a text. I'm really glad to have you here. I would like to just very quickly go around the room and introduce ourselves. I know that there are some faces maybe who aren't completely familiar. And oh, by the way, there are 3 on Zoom. Other times I have it on the screen and stuff. You know what? I see them. Really, I barely, only a couple. So why don't we go around the room, introduce ourselves, and then we'll get started. So, Earl, why don't you start?
Hi, my name is Earl. It is my first time here, so it's nice to see you all.
You're up. Yeah.
Looking forward to an interesting lecture.
Yeah, you don't need, thank you. All I ask is your name and then just something glowingly positive about me. Joking, of course. Elizabeth, go ahead. No, I was joking. I was joking. Well done. Thank you. Did you say memes? Oh, things. Because that's funny, you know, like all these hilarious memes that he's doing for us, which makes me feel like I'm nothing very. That's right. Where are we? Steve. Fabulous.
Barbara Moss, and I was intrigued by the title of this lecture.
Yep, it's intriguing.
And Stuart Moss.
All right, welcome everybody. Oh, and on Zoom, just so you know, Eleanor Feldman, Gene Ryzikoff, I'm assuming David Bowman, but I don't know with certainty. It just says David, Ann Wolfson, and Ellen Pendorf. Welcome to you all, and Murph, who just showed up. And on my phone, oh, I thought maybe someone was saying, and I'm watching you on stream or something. We're streaming and Zooming. So by the way, since we're streaming and Zooming, I just want you to know that, because if, you know, Zoom, okay, fine. So these 5 or 6 people here, and now also Sharon and Stephen Schwartz just joined. For the handful of people who are on Zoom, fine, whatever. But on stream, it means it's like archived for in time and memorial. So if you say anything that has any type of vulgarity, I will call you out, and I'll say, that was Barbara Wingrove. If you want to have some fun, someone else can say something vulgar and I'll blame it on Barbara Wingrove too. No, just want you to know that the people who are on camera, just to tell you, Steve, you're on camera. And you guys are on camera. And everyone in between. That camera right there is getting from Steve to the 2 of you guys. And therefore you guys too. So that means no weird gestures. All right, let's get to it. Femme fatale. Maybe you've heard of the expression femme fatale before. I think there used to be a TV series called Femme Fatale. There was, it's more, but what it is an archetype. And when I say an archetype, it's like a classic, the definition of an archetype, no, actually there's a femme fatale archetype. An archetype is just serving as kind of I can't believe I can't define it properly, but serving as the example, sine qua non example of something, the archetype. Or oftentimes it can be, I don't want to call it a caricature, but it can be an example of something which is completely undeserved, but it's still functioning that way. The femme fatale, in this particular case, the word femme, woman, fatale, fatal. The fatal woman. The woman who, because of her, wily guiles, is able to get a man to do anything that she wants, usually to her benefit and at his peril. Oxford Language Dictionary describes femme fatale specifically as an attractive and seductive woman, especially one who is likely to cause distress or disaster to a man who becomes involved with her. Catwoman, from the Batman stories, a femme fatale, right? She's so alluring and seductive, but one false move and she will stick a dagger in the chest of Batman. Femme fatale. There are so many in modern the modern world of cinema. There is I don't know if you're familiar with the Marvel movies, the Avengers, and there's this one called, I forget what her name is, but Scarlett Johansson, who is so beautiful, by the way. What's that? Black Widow, but correct. And she is part of the Avengers, but at the same time, she is out for her, like her main goal is that evolves over time, but you never fully trust her. You start to trust her as the movies go on, but you never fully trust her. And she is, because she can say something, she can make someone do something, because based upon whether her physical features or her seductive abilities. These are just some. Mata Hari, you know who the Mata Hari is? Mm-hmm. She was this, another person just joined in. The Mata Hari was a spy, I think, right?
Yes.
Why am I not able to let this person in? Oh, there we go.
It's also Lady.
They're all going to be like, what happened to you? Hi, sorry, we're back. Jezebel, right. Let me just make sure, are we still live streaming or not? Yep, still streaming. Okay. So, and the one that I'll be also looking at because it will be playing kind of a role in our conversation today a little bit later, so I'm not doing it, we won't be talking about it right away. Hester Prynne. Probably the most notorious Scarlet Letter. I mean, it's the most notorious Femme Fatale because, she was, everyone's afraid of her. So the Femme Fatale is not a new, even though it might be a new, I just want to make sure, let me just spotlight myself so people start talking, they don't necessarily. Sorry. All right, here we go. Okay, so, whatever. Oh, view maybe? I'm clearly not an expert with Zoom, or maybe I am. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to be taking a look at a specific story from the Talmud, of a femme fatale. However, we're not going to get to that story right away. Because in order to do it, what I want to do is look at some stuff ahead of time before we get to that story. Now, before I continue, I want to say that for me just to say, that, we have archetypes in our rabbinic literature as well, that's not so, well, I mean, it's kind of interesting, but not so interesting. What makes this interesting, in my opinion, is the fact that that our rabbinic literature actually rejects these archetypes. And that is what's kind of interesting, but it will take a while before you figure it out. And, I was reading a book recently in which someone made that claim and kind of explained about how there was a rejection of the archetype, and especially this one. And I just kind of so I started exploring that a little bit more, and that's why I kind of came up with this idea. So let's start with, one more thing before we go, before we move on to the text, which is that most, if not all, of the texts that I use, I can't remember now fully, with the exception of a little quote from Hester Prynne, most of it comes from the Talmud. When I say the Talmud, though, you should know that it also means the Mishnah is different from the Talmud, but it's the same as the Talmud. What I mean by that is the Talmud contains the Mishnah. The Mishnah does not contain the Talmud. The Mishnah is a part of it's a separate work of literature, the Mishnah. This is the earliest work of rabbinic literature that we have. But the Talmud is an exercise in taking the Mishnah and then discussing it further. Hopefully that you understand what I'm saying. So therefore, that's why I say the Mishnah is part of the Talmud, but the Talmud is not part of the Mishnah. The Mishnah is the kernel upon which the Talmud elaborates or discusses. So if you see something that says Mishnah, it's me just taking the kernel idea. And if you see the Talmud, it could be them discussing the kernel idea, or it could very well just be something that has nothing to do with anything. But I think in this case, it's always what discusses the kernel. So here we go. Mishnah, ketubot. Ketubot, you probably know because it sounds it, is if you know anything about Hebrew, you know that ot is the plural, feminine plural, and the singular of ketubot is ketubah. And so therefore, I think you know where this is going, that this is the subject of the Mishnah of the Mishnah / Talmud has to do with ketubas. That doesn't mean, though, that everything including it has to do with ketubas. It could be that that was the first step, and now they're moving forward and having conversations about other things that were offshoots based upon the idea, some question or some issue having to do with a ketubah. So in this Mishnah called Ketubot, it says, if someone, oh, by the way, one last thing, and then is that when you see bold and not bold, what does that mean? That means the bold is the actual text. What's not bold is what was either suggested as help for understanding it by a website called Sepharia, or which is the single greatest website for anyone who cares about Jewish books or Jewish literature.
How do I
And,
mute myself?
all right, hold on. I'm going to mute everybody. There we go. So so it's either from Safaria or it's my own. As I was going through it, it's like this will help make a little bit more sense. So just want you to know, if you're trying to, if I've said this to other classes that I teach, if you want to have fun, is just ignore all the stuff that's not bold and read just the bold, and see how much harder it is. To see what kind of a discipline it is to study Talmud. It's like when you're reading from Aramaic or Hebrew, oftentimes Aramaic, and but even if you looked at it just in English, forget about a different language. Look how complicated it is to understand what's going on. But this is the shorthand that these rabbis worked with. Anyway, if someone feeds his wife by means of a third party, serving as a trustee while the husband himself is not living with her for some reason, he may not give her less than 2 kav of wheat or 4 kav of barley a week for her sustenance. Rabbi Yossi said only Rabbi Yishmael, who was near Edom, allotted her barley, and he must give her half a kav of legumes and a half a log of oil and a kav of dried figs, or the weight of a maneh of fig cakes. And if he doesn't have these fruits, he must apportion for her a corresponding amount of fruit from elsewhere, and he must give her a bed, a soft mat, and a hard mat, and he must give her a cap for her head, a belt for her waist, and new shoes from festival to festival. Okay. So if the husband is dead, well, let's not use dead, out of town, living with somebody else now. Living with somebody else out of town, those are the classic two, right? What happens? A husband is obligated to make sure that his wife is taken care of. By the way, let's try our best not to get too upset with the way that things worked 2,000 years ago. I am not in any way supporting these kind of, male-centric ideas or thoughts. I'm merely reading them. Okay, just want you to know, just in case. So we have what happens. A wife needs to be provided for by her husband if her husband chooses to go out of town or live in a different home with a different person, different family, whatever. You have to provide, and they have laid out what it is that you need to provide for somebody, your wife, right? So, by the way, if you're wondering what a kav is, 4 logs to a kav. That help. By the way, if you're wondering what a log is, it's the size of 6 eggs. So that means 2 kavs or a kav is what, 24 eggs? The size, like the volume of 24 eggs. Meaning, you got to make sure that she's got enough food. Now, there is something, including, by the way, shoes from festival to festival. And you know how many festivals we have? 3, which means you need to make sure that she's always got a new pair of shoes for a new festival. Seems reasonable. What's missing from this? You would not know because, lots of things. What's the allotment of baby seals? All's missing, right? But there is one thing that's important that's missing here because it will be the focus of virtually all of our texts from this point forward, and that is an allowance for wine. What's missing is an allowance for wine. Sure, it's good that she's got bread and fig cakes and stuff like that, but what goes better with toast, jam, and some fig cakes than a nice Chardonnay? Really, right? And right, it doesn't just say Pinot unacceptable. No, I love Pinot. That's the one I got. Anyway, so now Ketubot 65a. It's the next one down. And you should just know that the Mishnah precedes this. And so they're now going to start it's all talking in the same area of this text. So it says, wines are not allotted to a wife. And if you say that in the verse, I will go after my lovers who give me my bread and my water, my wool and my flax, my oil and my drink, wine. Drink is apparently a reference to wine, and by the way, this is all added. This is not in the text. This is just helping you understand. Drink is apparently a reference to wine, which indicates that it is usual for a woman to receive wine. This is invalid since actually shikuyai is not referring to wine, but rather to items that a woman desires. And that they make that distinction because the Hebrew for desires is mishtokeket, and the word for drink, which they say would be wine, is shikuyai. And so therefore they say that those words sound so similar that it's not wine that is apportioned to these wives, but just something that they desire. And what is it that they desire? Jewelry. Okay, by the way, please, again, do not shoot the messenger. I do not agree with this. I'm just reading this, okay? So what they're saying here is, we know, if you were to say, oh, no, you're supposed to give wine too, because Hosea, the prophet Hosea, said in his verse, I'll go after my lovers who give me my bread, my water, my wool, my flax, my oil, and my wine. No, that's not what they mean. Hosea didn't mean wine, he meant jewelry. The rabbis will do whatever they have to do in order to make sure that they are right. So, the story continues. You already have your house. She's living in the house that she was living in before with her husband. Now her husband's no longer there, either because he's out of town or because he's living in a different house. I don't think they had mortgages back then, but maybe they did. Rabbi Yehuda of the village of Niviriah, and some say of the village of Nefor Chayil, interpreted a verse. From where is it derived that one does not allot wines for women? As it is stated, so Hannah rose up after she had eaten in Shiloh and after he had drunk. So this is the famous story of Hannah who prays for a son and who is accused of being drunk, though she's not. But she prays and she is ultimately, the Samuel is born to her. But what they're trying to say, though, is, what we're first figuring out is it okay for a woman to have wine or not? Right? Can a woman, can she be trusted with wine? And that the previous paragraph communicated that, well, even though Hosea kind of suggests yes, no, it's not, because you have to reinterpret that word for wine and understand that it's not wine, it's jewelry. Now, this one says, we haven't gotten to the punchline yet, but this one says, and so where do we know that women shouldn't be drinking wine? Why is it that we're arguing about this? Or why is it that this has become an issue and we're having this discussion? And they say, well, it's from that verse, Hannah rose up after she had eaten in Shiloh and after he had drunk. And what that text is suggesting, that she was doing the eating and he was doing the drinking. It states he had drunk and not she had drunk or they had drunk. And again, what you rightfully could be saying is, yeah, just the author, Hosea, just because they're like nitpicking every single word doesn't necessarily mean that that's a reflection of what actually happened. But that's what the rabbis did. They nitpick on every single word and they come up and they support their own opinions based upon how they can cherry pick and nitpick the various different texts of our tradition.
These were from scrolls that had been written hundreds of years before.
Yeah, well, Hosea is a prophet. He's in the Bible. And Samuel comes from the book of Samuel, which is the book right after, Joshua judges Samuel. Well, in these texts, it's a changed letter. So I would argue that, well, put it this way. If it was a dot missing, then we could say, really? If it's a letter missing, we might say correctly, well, that's a full-blown letter. Although the rabbis don't seem to have a problem changing around letters from time to time, and like that one about instead of it being wine, it turns out to jewelry. That was them doing a little bit of letter changing there. So clearly they don't have a problem with letter changes, only when it helps them. If it doesn't help them, then they have a real problem with letter changes. He and who, a yud and a vav. It really is just extending the letter down, actually, but it is what it is. It's clear as day that it's a difference, but it doesn't seem to bother them in other cases, but here it bothers them. Okay, I'm not speaking to, what's that? Who are we speaking about here? Elchanan, her husband. Got it. Okay. So it continues. Actually, so if you, by the way, you should know that when you're looking at a page of Talmud, it's the page and a letter, either A or B. And the reason why is because the Talmud is set up like this, in which it's, it could be 150 pages or fewer or whatever, but the point is that each piece of paper is a page. So it's page 25A, page 25B. And so that's what you're looking at here. However, the number that follows A, B is just specifically from this website called Sefaria. And so it just basically says which next little mini paragraph or statement it is. And so that's just so, but what you can glean from this when you look at that number after the letter is merely if it goes from 2 to 7, it means that I've left stuff out. Now, in some cases, we'll be coming back to the stuff in the middle, and in some cases we won't, and I just left it out because I was like, well, what's the point of just reading everything when it's not contributing to the point? So you should know that some cases I've left it out with intention, some cases I've left it out because we're coming back to it. In any event, now we're at 65A7. It was taught in a baraita. 1 cup of wine, here, oh my God, this is going to be, you're going to love this. In fact, when I read this the first time in my really? 1 cup of wine is good for a woman. 2 cups, a disgrace. Why? Because she'll become drunk. After 3 cups, she's going to become lustful and verbally request sexual intercourse. And 4 cups, she will even request intercourse from a donkey in a marketplace. At this stage, she is so drunk that she is not particular about whom she has relations. Okay, again, do not shoot the messenger, okay? I am not agreeing with this, I'm just, okay, but let me see, let's finish it off. Rava is just a rabbi, they taught that a woman should not drink much wine only if her husband is not with her. However, if her husband is with her, we have no problem with it. So let's just unpack this just a little bit. Aside from this is offensive, let's put aside this offends me, and let's just talk about what is going on here. So what they're saying is, women shouldn't drink because, all right, 1's fine, not too much stuff's gonna happen, but 2, it's a problem, it's a disgrace because she'll start acting all, woo, and it's like not very, appropriate. And then if 3, my God, it's like she's going to become so promiscuous. And then 4, she doesn't even have any standards for her promiscuity. Now, all of this is suggesting, though, that it's okay for a woman to be drinking wine. They're just now suggesting that there are limits. Again, don't shoot the messenger. Now, but then this rabbi jumps in named Rava, and he says, no. it just needs to, like, it's okay for a woman to drink how much wine she wants, just as long as her husband's present. Now, don't shoot the messenger. But at that time, certainly women didn't have the same type of confidence in terms of them being independent people. That marriage was so a father could somehow like take the responsibility off of his own shoulders and give the responsibility of taking care of this poor defenseless, dependent human being, and now there's another person taking care of her.
What's the approximate era in which this is being?
Well, this is third century. When it says the Mishnah, or it's CE. When it's talking about the Mishnah, it's talking earlier. It could be 2nd century. This could be anywhere between the 3rd and 5th century. And this part, Rava is 3rd century. Now, what Rava says is, no, let's not say she can't drink like it's not okay. Rather, let's say that just as long as she's got people there, just her husband, just making sure that, she's having fun, but she's doing so safely. It's kind of like when, as I was trying to introduce my growing up teenagers, to alcohol. I was like, why don't you have a drink with me instead of having your first one being out at a bar and you having no idea how it's going to affect you, and let's see what happens. So it's in a more controlled place. And it's kind of, now that's not a let's see what happens so you can then take this drinking thing on the road, but it's the same concept, which is let's, so long as I'm here with you, have fun, and I'll just make sure that you're not getting into trouble. Yeah. Well, I don't think this is referring to that, but that concept was definitely was happening at that time. In fact, that's the reason why we went from a faith of patrilineal descent to matrilineal descent. So let's now go with that as our backdrop, our introduction. Let's now go to our story. So our story is Ketubot 65a 9. So as you can see, it's just following in the same grouping here. So now we're going to meet. Let me just introduce you to the characters of our tale. You've got a woman named Homa, and she is the protagonist or antagonist, depending on how you see her. You have Rava, who is that same guy who said earlier in the last one that it's okay if she drinks just as long as her husband is present. You have, a little bit later on, we are going to meet Rava's wife, and she has no name. And finally, one other person is a part of this story, but he's dead, and that is Homa's husband who died, whose name is Abaye. Okay? So 4 people in the story, one's dead. Now, the setting is a courthouse. And where is this courthouse? It's in the community of Mehoza, which was in Persia / Babylonia on the banks of the Euphrates River, an area of many, many Jews and schoolhouses, learning centers, but not just Jews. It was a mixed community. And so they're in the courthouse of Rava. Rava's a rabbi, but a rabbi most prominently's position is that of kind of a judge. Why? Because we have rules, we have laws, and we have to interpret those rules and laws to determine if, what happens. And so the Gemara relates. Gemara, by the way, is just the term to describe the discussion of the Mishnah in the Talmud. So it's like Mishnah plus Gemara equals Talmud. So the Gemara relates, Abaye's wife, remember Abaye's dead, Homa, came before Rava after Abaye died, as Rava was the local judge. She said to him, apportion sustenance for me. So it's not exactly the same as before, which is when a husband, is no longer living in the house. But this is a more of a formal process of when, especially when a sage dies, but even when others die too, as to how is it that the widow is taken care of after her husband dies. Because it does go back to that thought, which is that a woman is completely dependent on a man. Not agreeing with it, but dependent on a man, and so therefore your husband dies, you need help from the state, from the community. So she said, apportion sustenance for me, as I am entitled to be sustained by Abaye's heirs. Rava apportioned sustenance for her. Okay, so he's like, oh yeah, let me just go through my calculations. He's got the visor on, with the adding machine in front of the tickers coming out. I see that you get a grand total of 27 logs of whatever, 24 calves of whatever. She says, he apportioned sustenance for her. She subsequently said to him, apportion wine for me. Rava said to her, I know that Nachmani, i.e. Abaye, did not drink wine. Okay, so let's just stop here for a moment. So what he says is, I know your dead husband. I know him well. In fact, I should tell you that we know that Rava and Abaye were close, dear friends and study partners. They were best friends. And Rava is communicating that to Homa by saying, I know Nachmani. That was his actual name. But everyone called that, but his name became Abaye, which was like an honor, a title for him almost. But his real name was Nachmani. And so Rava says to Homa, who is standing in front of him as he is presiding over this court moment, and he says, I knew Nachmani. I even call him by the name that no one else calls him. Right? That's his way of saying, I know this guy. He didn't drink wine. So for you to say that we need to apportion you wine, you're making that up. Right, and we're supposed to give you season tickets to the Ravens on the 50-yard line. He didn't know football. You did not go to the Ravens games. Now you want season tickets? That's not, and first class seating on every flight you take? No. I know Nachmani. He did not fly business class. He flew coach. You fly coach. Okay, this is kind of what's happening here. So, since you were not accustomed to drinking, this is the extra writing, wine during your husband's lifetime, you are not entitled to it after his death. Okay? So, she said to him, by the master's life, in other words, by my husband's, in other words, I pray to God, this is not correct. In fact, he would give me wine to drink in cups, which is choufraze, as large as this. Right? That's what she's saying. And this is exactly what happened. She goes, he would give me wine, these goblets that were this big. Now, here's the problem. She gestured with her hands to show how large. While she was showing him the size of the cups, her arm became uncovered. She does this, and as you can see, just like what happened to me, suddenly now you're seeing my between my wrist and this part of my arm because I did this, right? And And as she was so beautiful that it was as though a light had shined into the courtroom. All of a sudden it was like, whoa, and it was like sparks of light are going everywhere, right? And then what happens? All of a sudden, our femme fatale has struck again. Because women aren't supposed to be showing off their skin like that. In fact, you know that Orthodox women, you're supposed to make yourself, like almost, you should be covered. You're supposed to be covered. Rava arose, went home, doesn't say anything, just all of a sudden exposes her arm. He's like, court dismissed, or court I'm going home. Right? So Rava arose, went home, and by the way, if you were thinking that this was going to be like a PG-rated session today, you should have known better when you saw Femme Fatale. In any event, so Rava arose, went home, and requested intercourse from his wife, the daughter of Rav Chisda. So his wife is only mentioned not by name, but by who her father is. And Rav Chisda was a famous rabbi, no question. And so therefore she's famous because she comes from a famous family, but it's not even that she gets her own name here. Okay. So he went home and said to his wife, and she's like, what are you doing home so early? I was expecting you back for 3 more hours. He's like, hey, let's upstairs, me and you, right? And so the daughter of Rav Chisda said to him, who was just now in the courtroom? Right? So she's like, oh, really? When was the last time you came home in the middle of the afternoon for this? And he says, and she's like, what happened today? Who was in your courtroom? And he said to her, Homa, Abaye's wife. The same guy who I call Nachmani, but maybe you only know him as Abaye, so I'll just refer to him as Abaye to you. But Homa, my best friend, who's now dead, his widow. Upon hearing this, Rava's wife went after Homa and struck her with the lock of a chest until she drove her out of the entire city of Mechoza. So what's the lock of a chest? A chest, a lock of a chest is like a peg or like a stake or something that kind of goes in. If you kind of have a lock, sometimes you can put a padlock, but you can also just stick something in there and then it prevents the chest from opening up. And so she pulls that thing out, and she is literally like a woman with a rolling pin. If you want you want a picture, just picture a rolling pin, but she's not using a rolling pin. She's like, I will get, and she's whacking Homa. Right? Now it's getting a little interesting here. And she said to her, she drove her out of the city, saying to her, you've already killed 3 men. As Abaye was your 3rd husband, and now you come to kill another one? My husband? Because you kind of, you showed off to him, now he's kind of in love, infatuated with you, and that just means that you're going to kill him, my husband too. And that's how the story ends. But there's so much to this story which needs to be unpacked a little bit. And so let me just help you a little bit here. So, what did she mean when she said you've killed 3 husbands? And now you're coming to kill a 4th? Well, so she had been married twice already. And now she got married a 3rd time and in both cases, her husbands died. And now she married Abaye, and he died. So, Black Widow, correct. The femme fatale, the Black Widow, the woman of death, you are causing their deaths. It's the wrist. So, and we know, and let me tell you the corollary to this story. The corollary to the story comes from the Torah. in the middle of the story of Joseph, we have one chapter devoted to this guy named Judah, who was Joseph's older brother. Judah, there's a woman named Tamar. Tamar marries Judah's son, whose name is Er. Er dies. We don't know why, he just dies. The principle of the Levirate marriage has it that if you are married and your husband dies and he has unmarried brothers, that they marry you. Why? Because you keep the name. You're able to keep the lineage. So she marries brother number 2, does Tamar, and his name is Onan. Onan, it says, he wasted or spilled his seed, and as a result, he was punished and died. 2 deaths. Judah's got a 3rd son named Shelah. She says, the rules, and Judah doesn't want to marry off Shelah to Tamar, and so holds it back, and then there's the rest of the story. I don't need to. But the point is that that's a corollary to this tale, and that what it's called when you have a woman who has been a widow twice, she is referred to as an Isha Katlanit. And an Isha Katlanit is a fatal woman. And that means that there's a stigma attached to her as a woman who causes death. Now we know, obviously, that she did not cause the deaths of her husband, because there's natural things that happen to human beings that make them die, and not just the presence of a woman. However, then when there were these things happening that they sometimes didn't understand it, or they read into it things like this is punishment for whatever reason, and so this is the rule that you have a label about you, and that label is being what's called an Isha Katlanit. Now, let me show you the text which talks about, doesn't usually that word, but it's okay. So in the next one, this is from Yevamot 6. So now we're in a different book of the Talmud. And so it says, if a woman was married to her first husband and he died, to a second one and he also died, she may not get married to a 3rd husband. This is the statement of Rabbi Judah Hanasi. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says she may get married to a 3rd husband, but if he also dies, she may not get married to a 4th husband. So I guess they're arguing just about the numbers. When are you officially the femme fatale? When are you officially the black widow or the scarlet letter? That happens, one person says after 2 deaths, another person says after 3 deaths. Now, so now let's talk about Abaye. Remember her husband who died. So he clearly knew about this, and that there was an argument about how many deaths need to happen. And he decided to go with the more lenient. Like, no, I think I'll take my chances. Why? She was probably that attractive, or that alluring, or that seductive. Who knows? But the point is that he took his chances, but he wasn't going against, the law. Like, there was an argument here. It was not settled as to when a woman is unable to get married. Okay, we know now that in both cases, so now she's got 3 dead husbands. So we can at least acknowledge that now she can't get remarried, but that doesn't mean she wasn't able to get remarried before.
Has she inherited all the wealth of each of the husbands who died?
No, but she is getting an allowance from them based upon, or the latest death is the allowance that you get from the community. And wait, give me 1 second. All right, go ahead, Tom, and then I'll see if I can remember what I was supposed to say.
When Ralph arose, went home and requested intercourse of his
Yes, his request was definitely denied. Yeah, I should have said that. Right, his request was denied. Okay, so let's continue with Yevamot, the next one. So, so we just learned about, how many deaths equals you can't get married. So we know clearly also when she went before Rava in that courtroom, this was the last time she was ever going to be standing there. So she needed to make sure that she got everything she wanted because there was no appeal. The Gemara asks, granted, with regard to circumcision, a presumption of death due to circumcision can be established because there are families whose blood is thin and it does not clot well, and there are families whose blood clots. So in other words, it's like, okay, if you have two boys who die right after you circumcised them, then it's fair to suggest that maybe there's some genetics that are involved here and that you shouldn't circumcise your third son because physiologically maybe there's some reason. However, in the case of marriage, what's the reason for concern that a subsequent husband will die? Rav Mordechai said to Rav Ashi, Avimo of Hagronya said in the name of Rav Huna as follows, her spring is the cause. Spring is a euphemism for her vagina. Right, is the cause. In other words, woman has some sort of condition that causes those who have intercourse with her to die. They can't explain it, they're just saying it, right? Rav Ashi said that her constellation is the cause of her husband's death. Ah, that's interesting. What's that? Kinda.
Astrology, some kind of astrological.
That, yeah. Or it's yes, astrological when she was born. Or, by the way, it's the Hebrew is mazal, which is stars. And so it's talking about that, but we know mazal also is luck. So it's like luck, or it's the stars, astrology. But what he's saying is there's no reason, it's just dumb luck. Like we can actually agree with that. That one makes a lot of sense to us. There's no reason, just because. So it continues. Abaye relied on this report, which said that she was 2 times a widow, and went and still married Homa, the daughter of Isi, son of Rav Yitzchak, son of Yehuda. Homa had previously married Rahava of Pumbedita, and he died. And then she married Rav Yitzchak, son of Rabba bar Hana, and he died. And he, Abaye, married her nevertheless, without concern that he had been established to a woman whose husbands die. And he died as well. But again, according to Rav Ashi, it's just luck, dumb luck. The other rabbis were trying to explain that, oh, no, there's a reason. But it's just luck. So let's now talk about Hester Prynne for a second. So this is just just an excerpt from Scarlet Letter, and I didn't cherry pick so that I took things out of context or anything like that. But I didn't give you because Hawthorne. I don't mean reading Hawthorne all day here. I gave that up in high school. The door of the jail being flung open from within, there appeared a young woman, tall, with a figure of perfect elegance. Her beauty shone out and made a halo of the misfortune and ignominy in which she was enveloped. The unhappy culprit sustained herself as best a woman might, under the heavy weight of 1,000 unrelenting eyes, all fastened upon her and concentrated at her bosom. It was almost intolerable to be born. She would become the general symbol at which the preacher and moralist might point, and in which they might vivify and embody their images of woman's frailty and sinful passion. Who would have persuaded the struggling woman that the outward guise of purity was but a lie? By the way, in case you're not, that's I think Hawthorne is referring to all the staring eyes. that their outward gaze of purity, they're like holier than thou. It's all a lie. They're all like this too. And that if truth were everywhere to be shown, a scarlet letter would blaze forth on many a bosom beside Hester Prynne's. Okay, so I shared that with you because this was the moment in Scarlet Letter, at least as I remember it, in which suddenly it went from being shame on her to shame on everyone else. Make sense what I'm saying? You know, it's the story starts out with kind of, you know, Hester Prynne was wrong, inappropriate, wrong, a problem, an issue, needs to be dealt with back in those kind of Puritan days. And it kind of, at this moment, all of a sudden, that our emotion and our feeling of connection went from being against her to being with her and being sensitive to her and compassionate. And I think, and I share this with you because, you know, that Hester Prynne is a similar archetype, and it falls into the same category as Homa, in which at first there's the woman, the wife of Rob. You know, first Hester Prynne comes in, and it seems as if she's lying about how much wine that she would drink, when Rava knew for real, because he was her best, his best friend, that he didn't drink wine. And so we feel as if the Talmud is trying to say to us, she was kind of a manipulative, black widow, trying to get everything she could. She's going through husbands left and right, just trying to get as much out of the courts as she possibly can. And then you have the very chaste and pure Rav Chisda's daughter, who is like, what happened to you? Who put this spell on you? And she goes chasing her with the rolling pin, metaphorically. And that's where the story ends. But the Talmud, even though that's the story, doesn't just leave it alone. So, and gives us clues. And I want to share with you, let's look at some of the clues. So now we're going to go down. Yeah. By the way, we have probably better Hester Prynne experts in this room than me, but go ahead. Me too, but what I'm saying is that only... Yes, no. Yes, 100%. And what my only point was that... No, my only point was that there was a moment when the story kind of turns, and then it kind of almost, and then we become fully in her court, whereas before we might have been, well, maybe, we're not sure, did she do something wrong, blame the victim, but, and it's like the Me Too movement, but and then it turns, and that was merely my point. I'm agreeing that she is the heroine of this tale, and that she is a person that we should be fully all in and in caring for and our compassion for. That was my only point, was that it kind of, that Hawthorne just starts to kind of change the way that it's written in a way to start making us feel that way. So let's meet for a moment Rav Chisda's daughter. Okay, because we get to know her a little bit better in other places. So in the book of Shabbat, the volume of the Talmud Shabbat, it says, after citing Rav Chisda's recommendations to students, the Gemara cites his advice to his daughters. So we're about to read Rav Chisda, the Rabbi Chisda's advice to his daughters. And which is just so funny, because there's to think about the father having this conversation with his daughters. But anyway, Rav Chisda said to his daughters, be modest before your husbands. Do not eat bread before your husbands, because you might eat too much and look like a pig. Similarly, Don't eat vegetables at night. And vegetables can also be herbs and stuff like that. And why? Because they can cause bad breath. Like if you eat garlic or something like that, it can also, other bad smells. Do not eat dates at night. Don't drink beer at night because they loosen your bowels and you might have to go to the bathroom more than one, Don't, and by the way, don't relieve yourself in the place where your husbands relieve themselves because they may be disgusted by you. Again, I am not supportive of this. I am merely reading the words that came from the text. Okay. And when a person calls at the door seeking to enter, do not say, "Who is it?" and using the male form, but rather, "Who is it?" using the female form, because Hebrew is a gendered language. And so therefore you say, you could say, "Mi ata," who are you? Ata is you, male, or mi'at, who are you, female. And and Rav Chisda is saying to his daughters, always say mi'at, who is it, assuming it's a female, because you don't want to arouse, even give the look that maybe you would have expected a man to come to the door. Even though the irony of ironies is that in Hebrew, even though it's gendered, you say, if it's not clear, you go male, right? If someone knocks at the door and you literally have no idea, you're not expecting anyone, you're saying, "Who is it?" Male, not "Who is it?" Female. So, and then it continues, or I skipped a couple, but it continues. In order to demonstrate the value of modesty to his daughters, Rav Chisda held a pearl in one hand and a clod of earth in the other. The pearl he showed them immediately, and the clod of earth he did not show them until they were upset due to their curiosity. And then he showed it to them. This taught them that a concealed object is more attractive than one on display, even if it is less valuable. In other words, he taught his kids how to tease a man.
And just out of bringing back to Scarlet Letter, she walks out of the jail carrying her daughter.
Right?
Pearl.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Her daughter's name is Pearl.
That's right. So, okay. So what I want to do is a switch. I just want to flip-flop to, I realized that I probably should have. So, okay, so if you look at the bottom, the second one, Yevamot 34b. When Ravin came from Eretz Yisrael to Babylonia, he said that Rabbi Yochanan said, any woman who waits after her husband has died or divorced her for 10 years without intercourse and is then married can no longer bear children. So if you've been divorced, then for 10 years, or a widow for 10 years, and then you finally get remarried on 10 years and a day, you are no longer able to bear children. This is what he said. Rav Nachman said, they taught this principle only with regard to cases where she did not intend to get married at a later time, but if she did intend to get married at a later point, she can become pregnant later on. They're backpedaling from that. Rava said to his wife, the daughter of Rav Chisda, and remember, by the way, this is not part of our story. It is part of our story because it's the same people, but just from a different place. The sages are gossiping about you. From the time she was widowed from her first husband until the time that she was married to Rava, more than 10 years passed. Yet she bore him children. And what does that mean according to the rabbis? She had been with other people practicing or keeping the pump primed, so to speak. And so he's saying that they're talking about you because if we got remarried, because you're a widow one time, once. And if you're a widow once, and it was more than 10 years, we shouldn't have been able to have children. And so they're talking about you as you weren't honest. So, and then she says, it seemed as though you had engaged in intercourse in the meantime. She said, yeah, but my mind was on you the whole time. Yeah, right. So let me explain what that's about. Or let me explain to you why she said this. And now we have to go to the previous one. That's why I flip-flopped it. I just put them out of order by accident. This is from a book called a volume called Baba Batra. It was like this incident involving the daughter of Rav Chisda. Same person, right? Who, when she was a child, was sitting on her father's lap while he sat and learned. Rava and Rami Bar Hama were sitting before him. So Rav Chisda, her father, has these two students in front of him. They're probably 15 years old. She's 8, and she's sitting on her dad's lap. Rav Chisda jokingly said to her daughter, which of them do you want as a husband? She said, I want both of them. Rava said, okay, I'll be last. And this is what happened. First, she married Rami Bar Hama, and when she died, she married Rava. When he died, she married Rava. Okay? So, point is that this is showing that Rava's wife, the one with the rolling pin, she is also a widow. One time. Right? So, now let's just make sure we go over all of the setting and details. So we have, or just go back to our primary story. And now let's think about it from the perspective of Homa. She goes into her courtroom. She's surrounded by suspicion and prejudice. It's kind of like this, Hester Prynne with all those eyes on her. Right? She is undeniably this Isha Katlanit, this Femme Fatale who cannot get married ever again. She's got 3 dead husbands. She's like, I want wine allotted to me. And Rava says he didn't drink wine. And she presumably, although it's not written here, she does. She says, yes, he did drink wine. I know, I'm adding that. I drank wine in cups this big. Right. But she was saying, yes, he did. And then we're having like a little love triangle here. Who knew this guy better? His best friend and study partner or his wife? And now we're having a little fight in the room about a little pissing match, to use an old disgusting expression. In other words, you think you knew him better? I knew him better, right? And so, Rava's like, I knew him better. I called him, Nachumi, his real name. That's how well I knew him. And she says back to him, you have no idea anything about him. Just because you studied with him doesn't mean you know him. We have our world inside our house and our world outside our house. Just because you studied with him doesn't mean you know him. I knew him. Right? And Homa, by the way, she didn't intend to arouse Rava in that moment. She was just fighting for what was hers. But however, seeing her arm, it made Rava realize that maybe there was something. There was like this mysterious sexuality to her and a lure to her. And he was realizing in that moment, oh my God, maybe I didn't know my study partner as well as I thought I did. Because if my study partner, who I think of as just, the always just head, deep into the books but he married this woman, he must have a different side to him than I realized. And suddenly, he is now thinking to himself, wait, that's exciting. I want that. And so what does he do? He goes home. And what happens? His wife says, who do you think what? And he's like, and he's hoping that maybe he can create, this spark that's happened to him that she kind of showed him, admittedly, but really it was something which it's part of and I'm not suggesting that there was, but he had a love affair with his own study partner too, a platonic love affair, maybe not, but let's assume platonic love affair with his study partner. And suddenly he's realizing that now these even more feelings are coming out about this. Now the study partner's dead, and he realizes there's this whole side to the study partner that maybe he didn't ever really appreciate and understand. And not only that, but there's this whole side to the world of being alive, which is not just about studying books, but there's more. And he kind of wants to dabble in that and see what that's all about. And it becomes like and now, thinking about the story from that perspective, let's keep going. So, okay, so we are now on Ketubot 65a11. And remember when I told you before I said something, I said I said there's stuff that I left out, or we did 65a9, and then we went, we did 2, 7, and 9, so now we're at 11. The Gemara relates a similar incident. The wife of Rav Yosef, by the way, I'll be able to help you kind of do the graph and the chart here of who is who, but you don't really need to know. It's just the final point, but I can help you. Anyway, the wife of Rav Yosef, son of Rava, came before Rav Nehemiah, son of Rav Yosef, for judgment. Same type of judgment. She said to him, apportion sustenance for me. Rav Nehemiah apportioned a certain amount of sustenance for her. Very similar, correct? Rav Nehemiah, she said to him, portion wine for me as well. We know what happened in the previous story. He said to her, he apportioned wine for her. And why? He said, I know that the residents of Mahoza, which is where they live, everyone lives, Mahoza, are accustomed to drinking wine. And therefore you too are entitled to wine in accordance with the local custom. And of course, Homa lived there too.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Do we know where Maposa is?
Yeah, on the Euphrates River, in that area of the various different Tigris, Euphrates, in that vicinity, yeah. Similarly, the next paragraph. Similarly, the wife of Rav Yosef, son of Rav Menashe Devil, came before Rav Yosef. She said to him, apportion sustenance for me. By the way, in the first one, it's Rava's daughter-in-law so it was his son's wife, very likely the son that he and Rav Chista's daughter had, okay. And then the second one, it's the daughter-in-law standing before a father-in-law. The wife of Rav Yosef, son of Menashe Devil, came before Rav Yosef. She said to him, apportion sustenance for me. He apportioned sustenance for her. She added, apportion wine for me. He apportioned wine for her. She continued, apportion silk garments for me. Rav Yosef said to her, why do you need silk garments? She said, for you, for your friends' friends. In other words, my husband might be dead, but I'm still kind of hanging around and you want me to look at least presentable when your friends come around. Right? So we're seeing in both of these cases that they immediately apportioned wine for the women. And even silk garments for the second one. But wine. And in the first case, it was like, why? It's because she lives in Mahoza. It's like she lives in New Orleans. Everyone drinks. Right? And that's just important only because home was from, but yet they didn't do it for her. And it was because they were under this impression that she was this, or originally like, no, you're like this prim and proper and no, of course. But when they say that she's this prim and proper woman, what Rava's really saying is my wife is that way. And since my wife was that way, and Abaye was my study partner, and I thought he was like that, that must mean you are like that, but what it really means is I just didn't know my study partner, and I certainly don't know you that well. It continues. Ta'anit. Next one. Rav Papa happened to come to the synagogue of Avi Govar in Mahoza, and he decreed a fast, and rain fell for them before midday. By the way, generally when your rabbi decrees a fast, it's because it's a drought and they need rain. And the rain fell for them before midday. And yet he recited Hallel immediately, and only afterwards they ate and drank. You're supposed to say, you're supposed to eat first and then say Hallel. The Gemara explains the inhabitants of the city of Mahoza are different, as drunkenness is common amongst them. Right, so the reason why, and so they're just like this was just a random story about why in this particular case they did Hallel first before sending people to go eat and drink. It's because they knew if they sent people to go eat and drink, they wouldn't come back to do Hallel because they would be drunk. So it's just saying another example. Mahoza, they were drinkers there. Pesachim, as you can imagine, has to do with the subject of Passover. And we said that there is concern for the safety of one who is drinking. But, and by the way, they're discussing 4 cups of wine at a Seder. And so and in discussing 4 cups of wine, they say that you're not supposed to drink in pairs, only when he intends to set on the road after drinking. But if he intends to remain in his home, there's no need for concern. In other words, like you're not supposed to have 2 drinks. 1, 3, 5, all fine, just not 2 and 4. Bad luck. But it's like, then they say, oh, but that's only if you're about to go on go out on the road, go home. But if you're at your house, it's okay. But Rava would count the beams of his house to keep track of the number of cups he had drunk, so as to ensure that he would not consume an even number. Okay, so this is now Rava. He was drinking, but he's entitled, and no one ever said he doesn't. But then it goes. But then the next one, which is the next, literally, just the continuation of this. And likewise, Abaye, dead husband, when he would drink 1 cup, his mother would immediately place 2 cups in his 2 hands so that they would not inadvertently drink only 1 more cup and thereby expose them to the danger of drinking in pairs. In other words, the Talmud is saying, oh, Abaye was drinking all the time. In fact, he was double fisting. That's an expression from when I was in college. That means if you've got a beer in this hand and a beer in this hand, you're double fisting. Okay. So,
is there some origin to why that might be bad luck of having an even number of drinks rather than?
I'm not sure. I should have. I didn't go into it too deep because I can go down these rabbit holes. Right. So what do we learn from this? Both Rava and Abaye drink. Homa did in fact know Abaye or Nahumi better. The stories from the volume called Ketubot suggest that drinking wine was typical in Mahoza. So then what is happening in this story? Why is it that they were so vindictive? Maybe, again, or why was he so vindictive? Maybe it's because he just blamed her for killing his best friend. And he didn't want her to have any chance to do this ever again to anybody. And he knew that by drinking wine, you never know, she could be with a donkey in the marketplace. Right? It's like, it's fascinating, right? So now there's one more thing, one last reading, and then with the oh, by the way. So, from Kiddushin. He further said, This has nothing to do with our story. This has nothing to do with our characters. It's just a concept. He further said, anyone who disqualifies others by stating that their lineage is flawed, that is a sign that he himself is of flawed lineage. It's the old takes one to know one argument. Another indication that one's lineage is flawed is that he never speaks in praise of others. And Shmuel says, if one habitually claims that others are flawed, he disqualifies himself with his own flaw. The flaw he accuses them of having is in fact the one he has. So, right, it is very true. So now let's take a step back for 1 second. Do you remember earlier when we talked about how there was that argument about what makes an isha katlanit, a femme fatale, what makes a woman? And there was this argument. One person said, Judaism, he said, 2 husbands die, you can't get married again. And then Shimon ben Gamliel says, oh, no, 3 husbands die, that means you can't get married again. So depending on whose opinion you follow, right, you might be considered an isha katlanit, or you might be unable to remarry if you have 2 husbands, if you're a widow twice or widow 3 times. And moreover, it doesn't have to be who you follow, it just matters who that man follows. If the man thinks that it's two and done, then it doesn't matter what you think. You can't say, no, because Shimon ben Gamliel says it's 3. But the man says, I don't care, I'm not marrying you. Right? So, and what do we know about Rav Chisda's daughter was that she was one time a widow. But now let's go back to just the last line of our story. Our story says, what the last thing as Chisda's daughter is waving her rolling pin at her, she says, you've already killed 3 men. Now you come to kill another? Right? You've killed 3. And my husband is now gaga over you. You're going to kill him too. And do I care if he dies? Yes. But you know what I really care about? Is what that's going to make me if he dies. I become you if he dies. Right? And so suddenly, it's almost as if now what's going on is, it's like the rabbis are not telling a story about a bad woman, but they're telling a story about how others treat that they are unable to treat another. They are so concerned about what's going to happen to them that they can't even treat a person with sensitivity, with kindness, with respect. Homa did nothing wrong. She came in, she asked for what was hers. She said, I'm used to drinking wine. That was the relationship I had with my husband. I know I'm not going to have another husband. At least maybe I can have some wine. They denied her. She was upset about it, but we don't even see her overreact. We don't even have how she reacted. Nothing. She might have just said, we have no idea. She might have said, I tried. They're wrong, but I tried. And she wasn't intentionally trying to create a thing when all she says, this is how much wine I would drink. And so this is now the villains of this are Chisda's wife, and to some degree Rava, who usually isn't thought of as a villain, but kind of. I mean, Rava was innocent. He was guilty of not trusting her, but that was really his one guilt, was not trusting her. His wife, Chisda's daughter, she's guilty of of just thinking about Homa as a man killer. And worse is about treating her poorly because of her own fears about herself. And the Talmud is actually taking that archetype and rejecting it, which I think is kind of an unusual thing, to reject an archetype, which doesn't get rejected too often.
So I have a general question here. Is this sort of about the historicity of this? did this actually take place in sort of a courtroom setting and was interpreted by the rabbis? Or is this a fiction that was created by the rabbis to illustrate a moral point?
Probably the second. But that doesn't mean that these people didn't live. And it doesn't mean that there weren't elements of this which are historical. But I think the totality of this story is made up.
So they started with the principle,
Yes.
the moral principle that we're trying to teach.
Yep. They're probably trying to teach, I mean, a lot of things can be true at once. They're probably trying to teach about what happens when you are a widow 3 times over or 2 times over, because that is so much of the conversation. And then they're also having the conversation about wine and what's appropriate for a woman and blah, blah, blah. But then also, in their telling of this narrative, they begin to realize that there are other lessons that can kind of come out of this too. So I think it's a lot of things can be true at the same time. Lisa. There's no traditional interpretation. The Talmud doesn't end with, and so this is what you understand. Different ones. I think I'm onto something. I did like when I say research, like I didn't like, it wasn't that I was researching like our traditional commentators. I mean, a little bit I did, but I was just reading kind of like thoughts about, scholars who just wrote about it. And I was like, wow, that's an interesting thought. This is an interesting thought, stuff like that. And, I took various different, ideas from various different people and I put it together. But but that's the beauty of an oral tradition, is that it's truly open to interpretation, and it doesn't, and without, there being an absolute to it, you really can tease out a lot of different messages from it. Although I think that, certainly what they weren't talking about, I don't think that the notion of an archetype and rejecting an archetype was their intention. I think that that's a little bit too kind of literary for them. But I think that they were making a statement about how it is that we treat people. And I think that they were had Nathaniel Hawthorne had written 2,000 or 1,900 years earlier, 1,800 years earlier, they might have said, well, oh, that's what we're inspired by how you're trying to kind of turn the lens not onto the person who everyone thinks is the bad person, but maybe turn it on them, make it a mirror instead. Like, I think that there is a lot of that going on here. And I think that that's something that they might have done, but because they are very much focused, the Talmud in general is focused very much on the principle of the other. How you treat a person who is not like you. And the Talmud it cares deeply about this. How you treat people who aren't like you, whether it's because of a physical defect, whether it's because of a choice that they made, whether it's because how they were born, whether it's what they believe religiously. There are so many ways that a person can be an other. And the Talmud is highly concerned with the way that we treat, because the principle is, we were others, so how do we treat another? You were a stranger in the land of Egypt. Make sure you treat the stranger this way because you were a stranger in the land of Egypt. You should know how this feels. And so I just find it to be a very, it's a very kind of, obviously you have to dig a little bit, but if you're just reading the story, it's a fun story, but it's hard to kind of make sense as to why this is the story as it is. But once you kind of bring in the context from other places and you compare it to how they dealt with, and it's not like they were hiding it, by the way, because some of the tales about this person and then it was silk garments too, right? That follows this story. So they are immediately after our story showing how other people were getting wine in Mahoza. Right, so if that story is meant for you to be somewhat, ambivalent, maybe about who is the hero, heroine, and who is the villain, the subsequent stories kind of start to say, oh, no. In case you were thinking that she was the villain in this story, she's not. She was mistreated because take a look at these other stories. So it's that's the part about the archetype being turned on its head, because we stopped, we're like, no, you misunderstood. You shouldn't have read it that way. Read it a different way, because we've got these subsequent stories which tell you to read it differently. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
So maybe they go into another entry, but interestingly, so he gets aroused because he sees the risk, but he doesn't go for her. He goes home to his wife.
Goes home.
Now the wife is accusing him of Jimmy Carter because he had lust in his heart.
Right. Yes, that's exactly right. But really her problem is this, is because she knows it's her, and she knows that she's the femme fatale, and that and the problem is she knows that she's coming to kill him. And so her anger, right? It's like, that's the other thing, which is that if you're the wife, who should you be mad at? Your husband.
And then, but why? Just because he had lust in his heart?
Correct. That's not a good enough reason, but my point is that, but let's say that he had an affair with her. It's like you're mad at your husband, not with her. You may be mad at her too, but the point is that but in this story, it's in his heart, and she's got the peg from the chest out to stab her, right? And she drives her out and says, "You already killed 3, you're gonna kill my husband too," right? And it becomes, when you see that last line, you realize, oh, it's because this isn't about this is about her fear for what will happen to herself. And when you really think about it, isn't that what all of our kind of irrational or hostile acts, or the thousands of eyes in Hawthorne, it's all about fear that we're going to get dragged into something that's going to make us corrupt in some way.
Self-preservation.
Self-preservation, yeah.
The same thing you said 4 times had written earlier, but back to your Judas story, that is what happened, right? He blames her.
Yes.
The prostitute, but then he redeems himself, and then
Somewhat.
somewhat.
Because because in the story of Judah, is that she never marries the third son. Instead, she conceals herself and puts a mask on, and she actually Judah impregnates her. He doesn't realize who it is, and only later on in the story, when Judah finds out she's pregnant, he's like, "Shame on you, you terrible, terrible person." And she's like, "Yeah, but you didn't give me your other son." And he's like, "Doesn't matter, shame, shame, shame on you." And then she says, and he's like, "Who's the father?" And she says, the father is the person whose staff this is." And he looks at it, it's his own, and then he realizes that he was wrong. But that doesn't mean that it was that's like a terrible, sad story in which she had to take matters into her own hands to get the right thing to happen. I mean, he redeems himself because he accepted that he was wrong. I think we're Jews just because we come from Judah, the tribe of Judah in the center. Yeah. Look, still, the point though is that this tale is, I think, of all things, it's like takes what you in the same way as Scarlet Letter. You start out thinking this is a story about one way, and then you realize, nah, I was wrong at first. And it's really, and that this woman was mistreated, and not only that, but just like the Scarlet Letter, when Hawthorne writes, what was it about the purity? Wait, let me just get the quote. Right. The outward guise of purity was but a lie. Right? It's like, and it's the same, all the people reading it who think, oh, no, we're the pure ones. It's all a lie. It's their gazing eyes, on, it's like the Rav Chista's daughter's eyes on Homa, and it's basically saying, I want to stay pure. I don't want my husband, I don't want to become like you. And so therefore I'm going to do whatever I have to do, which is do utterly unacceptable things, like hurting you and driving you out of town as my way of preventing any type of this happening to me. It's a selfish response to a sad story.
Underlying things hypocrisy
Yes.
as well, right?
Yep. And so, yeah. So, oh my God, 11:35. We went 5 minutes over. But thank you all for being here. I thought this was fun. I love preparing and talking about it with you. Yeah. Pleasure.